We touched upon this briefly in the previous series of talks on the houses. So if you need to go back and review the houses 1 through 12, you can access them through this channel, YouTube channel. And what we're going to be looking at are the carakas. So in the previous talks, I mentioned a particular planet for each house that is a representative or indicator for that house, a karaka for that house. But now let's get into what exactly is a karaka. Well, a karaka is an indicator. It is a representative of a particular person, thing, or area of life. And this is why, for example, if we want to consider a person's children or relationship with children, we look at the fifth house, which that area of life the fifth house represents is children, creativity, that which lives on, our legacy. And Jupiter is a planet that's representative of children and creativity. So what we see is when we have to look at a chart, we want to understand that we need to look at both the karaka as well as the house, as well as any other indications that relate to that particular thing. And this has been illustrated over and over again, but one example I had yesterday with a client, someone had told this client previously that having the ruler of the second house and the 12th was bad for finances. Well, that's a general rule, and generally that makes sense because the 12th house deals with expenses and losses. The second house can be a financial house, so taking finances and putting them in a loss house, we can think that we're going to get losses. But this illustrates the very point that I try to make over and over again, that you can't just say those things. You have to consider the dignity of the second lord in the 12th. If the dignity is good, the person may spend on good things, so they don't seem bad, or they don't seem like losses or expenses. Also, we need to look at planets that deal with debt. We need to look at the karakas of the second house. And when we put all these things together, what do we get but a full picture of what's really going on? And the example or ideas that I often give are that if you have 4 people in a room and each of them is doing something different, well, those are 4 energies going in 4 different directions, which means that more than likely you're not going to have an experience that is congruent or leads to confluence. Or, let's say, for example, you're trying to accomplish something. And when you're trying to accomplish something, you need to be in the right place, at the right time, with the right people, doing the right thing. And that's representative of the karaka, the house involved, the dasha, the transit. And once we start to see that in order to get an experience, a specific experience, you have to have all these things line up. Well, astrology gets a little more detailed, and that's why it's not really an easy thing. So if you get an astrologer who's able to look at one aspect of the chart and give you an exact idea of what's going on, well, they might get lucky. They might be intuitive or psychic, and there are a lot of astrologers that really aren't astrologers, they're just psychics, and they use the astrological chart as similar to if we would use the tarot or any other kind of divination method, where the chart gives them a point of access to get the information. But anyway, that's fine, and there's no problem with that, but it's not necessarily astrology. So if we're trying to work on astrology as something more scientific or something replicable by those of us who aren't psychic, or by those of us who aren't that lucky, then we need to really consider all these factors, these moving parts all at once, and expand our mind and our consciousness to be able to do it, and also have a very realistic understanding of what goes into making a prediction. And one last thing about this is that a lot of people contact astrologers because they want certainty. And that's the tricky thing. You can give certainty if 4 out of 5 factors point in the same direction. But as I mentioned, if all the factors we're looking at for this particular thing are going in multiple directions, you can give probabilities. you can't give certainty, because the strength is going multiple ways, and it can go either one of those ways depending on the person's willpower or the person's state of consciousness. So when it comes to astrology, do I think that it has the capacity to be 100% certain? I do think that capacity is there. How much work, how much time would it take to go through every little bit of astrological information to get to that? That's probably more than most people want to pay for, which, is understandable. And it might even be more than most astrologers want to do. I love doing that myself, but I don't always get the opportunity because people want quick answers. And so when we do that, we again have to trust our intuition. We have to look at as many variables as possible and try to give the best assessment or the best potential trend or possibility that we can. But anyway, back to this point of karakas. So this is another area or level that you want to consider. And there's a lot of detailed information about karakas. One of the best courses that you can take is Ernst Wilhelm's Jaimini Sutras course. And if you go to AshevilleVedicAstrology.com and you go to the MP3 download section, it's listed there. So if you scroll down beyond my classes, you'll get to Ernst's classes, and you'll find that he's got Jaimini 1, 2, and 3. And there's an excellent course on the carakas, the carakas, the changeable carakas, the fixed carakas, and how we use those. So please, if you want to go in more detail with this, find his course, download his course, and you can find it at my website. And that's going to give you months, if not years, of study. The level of contemplation that he's put into understanding Jaimini is profound. Sometimes it's hard to understand, but again, same thing, if you sit with it for a while, as you're meant to do with all astrological texts, you start to see it. And this is one of the prime principles that I use when I do a reading. I compare the Parashara system to the Jaimini system and see where the overlap is, and that helps me personally be more accurate as an astrologer, so it can do the same for you. So first of all, when we're considering karakas, the first karaka we want to consider is the AtmaKaraka, the soul indicator. The AtmaKaraka is the planet in highest degree within the chart, excluding Rahu and Ketu. So if your sun is at 27 degrees and every other planet is below 27 degrees in each house, then the sun becomes the AtmaKaraka. If Saturn is the highest in degrees, again, the degrees only go from 0 to 30 because you can only have 30 degrees within a sign. Saturn highest degrees, then Saturn becomes the AtmaKaraka. And as I mentioned in a previous video, one of the things that Parashara indicates, again, is this idea of context. So in Brihat Parashara Horashastra, under the aspect of importance of AtmaKaraka, he says, just as by the order of the king, his son and his ministers, etc., are capable of doing public works, in the same manner, the other karakas also become effective if the AtmaKaraka is strong. Just as the ministers are not capable of doing public works if they are adverse to the king, in the same way, if the AtmaKaraka is inauspicious, the other karakas are unable to give auspicious effects. And he goes on a bit here. But the point being that if the AtmaKaraka is strong, then the other karakas can do their job better. Just like if we have a good, strong, respectable king, the ministers will listen, the generals will listen. But if we have an inauspicious AtmaKaraka, and inauspicious, it doesn't mean whether it's a malefic or benefic. That's not what we're considering here, because you can have an auspicious Saturn. If we have an auspicious, well-supported AtmaKaraka, then that makes the whole chart work better. And you've heard me talk about this before. There can be lots of promise within a chart, but if the ascendant and the ascendant lord is in bad shape and can't actualize those potentials, it doesn't matter how great a person's career is going to be indicated to be or how great their finances are going to be. If their first house, their ascendant, their first house lord is in bad shape, it's like a weak person with a great life. They can't enjoy it. They can't do anything with it. Same thing if you have a strong first house, or if you have a strong ascendant lord, and there are problems in the chart, well, that's like having a strong person going into a troublesome situation. More than likely, that person can make the best of it and even thrive sometimes. So again, Parashara indicates here and hints at that idea that we need to be holistic in our approach, and we need to put things in context. The reason I bring this up is because I believe in the last video, or the last talk I did, I read one of the Parashara Bhava Yogas, which was something like, if born in a royal family, one will be a king. If not, then will be like a king. So again, Parashara indicated there that we need to take into context, is this person born in a royal family? If so, they'll be a king. If they're not, then they'll be like a king within their family. So again, context is key, and that's why it's usually very good if the astrologer is responsible enough to talk to the person beforehand to get some sense of who is this person, where do they come from, what's their background. That's going to allow the astrologer to better understand what their possibilities are, what their foundation is. And this should be true of any profession. If you're a doctor, the doctor takes some history so that he can understand what's going on. If you're a financial advisor, the financial advisor takes some history in regards to your spending habits, your debts, so that they can project the possibilities for you. So try to get rid of this idea that an astrologer is meant to be an all-seeing, all-knowing being just by looking at your chart. There are very few of those in the world. Most of those are probably saints and sages, and those that are all-knowing we don't know about. The ones that profess to be all-knowing, or that we see on TV or YouTube these days, or have great big followings and organizations, typically are just, well, people doing their best. Let's just put it that way. So, point being, we need to take into consideration who we're talking to. And the state of the AtmaKaraka can give us an idea of the foundation. So same thing. We want to check the ascendant lord. What's its strength? What's its potential? Then we want to check the AtmaKaraka. What's its strength? What's its potential? If both of those are good, this person's going to make some progress in life, even if there are difficulties. But most people are average. You know that. And this is something a lot of students have started to realize, when I've been working with them and they see it now, is that everyone wants it to go one way. They're looking for success. They're looking for that fairy tale greatness that just happens because you decide you want it. And most people are just average, meaning that their ascendant lord might be weak, but their AtmaKaraka is strong. So sometimes things work out great, sometimes they don't. It's very rare that you find that all of these line up very powerfully, and those are going to be the people that are the movers and the shakers, and that do great things. But those are also the people that it's normal and natural for them, which means they're probably not coming to an astrologer for those things. It's just innate or inborn. And the real joy of astrology, when I feel it works well, is when a person who doesn't have that learns to make peace with their situation. And once you know where you are, then you can take steps to improve your life. The problem is, a lot of people don't want to do that, meaning that they want to have money, but you tell them, well, you need to study business, and you need to understand how finances work, and they throw up their arms and say, no, I don't want to do that, because again, most people are childish. And that's not to be judgmental, it's just if you look around, you'll notice that. And the people who are successful realize that it takes hard work and dedication, and that sometimes you have to make sacrifices in order to have success in various areas of life. But I've gone over this before, so not to beat a dead horse, as they say. But being an astrologer, I get a lot of requests and people contacting me that sometimes what they're asking is not either not a valid question, or based on the way they ask, you can tell that the information they want is not how do I improve my situation, or what do I need to deal with or make peace with. It's how do I support my fantasy. And those of you who know me well or have taken classes with me know that truly I'm a yogi first. Meditation, spiritual growth, making peace with reality, that's my personal ideal. I practice Kriya Yoga. I study the works of Ramana Maharshi, Vasista's Yoga, and the more you start to embody these things and understand these things, you realize that the world doesn't really bring you satisfaction, that you're here to play a role, and that role could be being wildly successful. It could be being a janitor. I have a good friend. He's an excellent musician, but he's also a janitor, and he has no problem with that whatsoever. He enjoys doing work. He's a hard worker, and he realizes that that's his way of paying his bills so he can play music and support his wife. And he's made peace with that. So he's a very beautiful person in that aspect. And so if I think of someone who's successful, he's one of the people I look to, because he's doing what his chart says he's meant to be doing. He's at peace with it. He's doing his best with the money that he has, and he's exploring things that he enjoys. So always remember that when it comes to success, astrologically, success is fulfilling our chart. And sometimes that is consciously suffering, moving through it, seeing that as also an aspect of God. But it's not just suffering, so we don't want to be too focused on the negative. Sometimes it's enjoying the wildly good things within our life, and they come and they go. That's the nature of this existence. And we can see that through the dashas, and we can see that through the transits. But ultimately, what we want to do is really know what we are, which is unaffected by these things. That's self. And that's where the practice of yoga and meditation comes in. And so that's, in my mind, really the ultimate remedial measure. Because once you have that, it's like knowing that you're in a dream. And then when you're dreaming, you deal with the dream as best as possible. You're going to wake up eventually. So, all right, so I digress once more. It happens every now and then. But let's get back to the karakas. So we've already talked about why the strength of the AtmaKaraka is important and what the AtmaKaraka is. Now, there are also Karakas, and the AtmaKaraka is essentially a Karaka. Those are the changeable carakas. So the planets in different degrees represent different things, like the mother, the father, the spouse. We're not going to get into the Karakas. I'd really advise you study the Jaimini Sutras, particularly Ernst Wilhelm's course that we've already discovered, because it's a complicated thing. But we want to see what the how do I describe it? What the fixed carakas are. And so the fixed carakas, these are the same in everyone's chart. So for example, the AtmaKaraka, being a karaka, is always the planet in highest degree. The planet in highest degree. Now, the other fixed karaka that represents the self is the sun. So the sun in everyone's chart is also representative of the self. Okay, the body, the personality, the soul, the constitution, the health, the energy. And again, this is coming from Brihat Parashara, or Shastra, which we don't know a whole lot about this text, or Jaimini Sutras. I mean, parts of it have been pasted together or recompiled or reorganized, so we don't have an original of this. And it's been put forth that possibly these indications of the karakas, the karakamsha, the Rashi aspects, these sorts of things, that they are part of the Jaimini system that got sort of absorbed into Parashara. And yes, it's said that Jaimini was the son of Parashara. That doesn't change anything, because Jaimini could have had his own system that he developed, and over the thousands of years, as time has passed, parts of that was remembered and imported into the Parashara text. So let's not worry too much about that, because the point is that these aspects are the same both in Jaimini and Parashara. Whereas where does it derive from? Some people say that Jaimini got it from Parashara, which is why it's in Parashara and then in Jaimini. Some people say that Jaimini discovered it and then it became absorbed into Parashara. But either way, in my mind, I don't care where it came from. I just care that it works. So keep that in mind. There's some debate there. Jupiter is the karaka of the second house, and Jupiter is the natural karaka of finance, family. Some people say that the second house karaka is also representative of the wife, as well as the seventh, so there's some overlap here. Well, the second house as a karaka for the wife would be like our responsibility towards our wife. And again, this is past maybe from olden days when the man's responsibility was to take care of his wife, so the wife was a responsibility. I'm not sure it applies today, but maybe in some situations it does, and everyone's different. So Jupiter, karaka of the second house, significator of persons living in the family and finance, who we're responsible for. Mars is the karaka of the third house, the younger siblings. So our younger sibling, Mars is a karaka of younger sibling. Mars is also a karaka of our courage. So do we want to see how courageous a person is? We'll see how well supported the third house is, see how well supported Mars is. Are there positive logitati avashtas towards the third house with Mars? Better for the sibling, the younger sibling. And again, if you want to know about logitati avashtas, full course, both from myself and Ernst on the Asheville Vedic Astrology.com site. And remember that this free series that I'm doing, it's meant to be a survey course. And it's also meant to follow along with the book, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology. But to go into more detail, you really want to get some of these more specific, longer courses that focus on topics that we just briefly touch upon so that you can go deeper into your practice. And while I'm on that, a lot of you have contacted me about personal tutorials or classes. Well, yes, I did have classes planned for this year. Sessions and working on the second book has taken up quite a bit more of my time, and also a few astrological transits have been going on, which have been drawing me in other directions. So I still hopefully aim to get to some important group courses, telecourses, webinars. So if you want to know about those, please go to my website, ashevillevedicastrology.com, and follow it. That way when I announce it, you will know. And usually I can fit about 24 people in these classes. And they're teleclasses, they're webinars, so it doesn't matter where you are. It's over the phone or over the internet. The other thing that I wanted to mention too is that for personal tutorials, when it comes to personal tutorials, I need to make sure that we're all on the same page, meaning that you understand where I'm coming from and why I review or interpret things the way I do. And so before I do any kind of personal tutorial, number one, I do need to look at your chart to see if we're compatible. Number two, you need to read the book, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, and you need to take every MP3 course that I have offered, that I have posted on my website. And that's going to be over 50 hours or more. I don't remember how many hours it is now, of MP3s. So you take all those, then you're going to understand very clearly where I'm coming from. You're going to know my approach, my step-by-step process, especially the step-by-step course. But you have to take them all because they build upon themselves. And once I know you've taken them all, that way when we do the tutorial, I can say, all right, we're going to look at this, and I won't have to go through and explain 10 hours worth of things to you. You will have already had it. And it's also very economical because my tutorials are about $75 an hour, my personal tutorials, and the classes are very affordable in the sense that you can get 8 to 16 hours worth of teaching in classes for 40 to 60 bucks. So in the long run, in my mind, I think you get a better deal by starting taking the courses because that takes up many, many, many hours worth of training that we would have to do on our own, which would be more expensive for you. So my Saturn does try to make things within reach cost-wise, at least when it comes to educational matters, because I understand that money is important, we have to manage it, and it's good to save our money too. So you don't want to waste your money. It's a Saturn-ruled thing that I've become very aware of in my chart. So anyway, back on here. So the moon is the karaka of the fourth house, the mother, the heart, the mind, and the emotions. So if you want to know about these things, we look at the moon as a karaka. Jupiter, the karaka of the fifth house, deals with sons, our intellect, our ability to make improvements within our life, and also learning and growing and our legacy. Mars representative of the 6th house and enemies, which means we look to Mars, we assess the 6th house to figure out what's going to go on with our enemies. Venus, the karaka of wife or spouse or love in general, love relationships. That's the way I look at it, since nowadays, of course, we're not just talking about men getting astrology sessions. Saturn is the karaka of the 8th house and longevity. You want to know about a person's longevity? Consider the 8th house. What's the strength of the 8th house? What's the strength of Saturn? If they're both excellent, longevity is excellent. If one is good, one is bad, average. And these are generalities, but you get the idea. Jupiter is the karaka of the 9th house, which deals with our fortune, our grace, our religion, our connection to our guru, our culture. And they say fame, although I usually use the 10th house as fame. The 10th house. Now they say that Mercury is the karaka of the 10th house. I often look at the sun as well. But that's because Mercury is our capacity to manage the activities within our lives. So Mercury in the 10th house deals with status, profession, and tact. So you want to know about our status, our profession, our tact, our diplomacy? Look to Mercury. Jupiter. Now that is a karaka of the 11th house, which are financial gains, wealth coming to us, as well as our older sibling. And finally, Saturn is the karaka of the 12th house, which deals with expenditure and deals with loss. So we looked at Saturn, and we looked at the 12th house to see how we deal with expenses, which is indicated, again, by what I just mentioned in regards to Saturn and cost of classes and so on. So my Saturn does not rule my 12th house. My Saturn is not in my 12th house, but Saturn is very prominent within my chart, and so I'm very aware of expenses because Saturn is the natural karaka or indicator for that. So we can see that oftentimes we can just look at the karakas, which is why it's good to have a good birth time, but if you don't, you can get a lot of good information just by looking at the status of the karakas, which Jaimini astrology is really based heavily on, these karakas. Now we'll just talk a little bit more about karakas because we could say quite a bit more. For example, the next chapter in Brihat-Parashara Horashastra goes on to the effects of the karakamsha, which is the placement of the karaka within the Navamsha, what sign it's in, which is very telling. But whether a karaka is auspicious or inauspicious, here's what Brihat-Parashara Horashastra has to say. O excellent Brahmins, after the above procedure, or after we determine what the karakas are, the astrologer should establish the planets in the houses, beginning from the first or the ascendant and so on. And this helps us to know the good or evil effects. Of these houses, the 11th, the 3rd, the 8th, and the 6th, and the 2nd and the 12th are named as malefic or cruel houses. Now, in my experience, the 2nd and the 12th are more neutral. It just depends on how other things are situated. The house with which these will be associated will inflict evils. So again, that's 11th, 3rd, 8th, 6th, and according to Parashara, 2nd and 12th. And the houses of angles, 1, 4, 7, and 10, and those of trines, 5 and 9, are auspicious houses. When we have a karaka associated with these houses, they're endowed with auspiciousness, even if they're inauspicious. So even if there are negative things going towards the karakas, if we have a planet in 1, 4, 7, 10, or 5 and 9, they can still give their fruits with a little more notice. Alright, so that will cover the basic ideas of karakas. Took a little bit longer than I anticipated, but then I'd had some sidetracks there that I didn't anticipate. So start to consider these. Again, consider the houses as a particular area of life, then consider the karaka of that house, and see how they add up in regards to the dignity of the planet, whether there are good planets aspecting, supporting that planet, whether they're good lajatati avashtas towards that planet, what houses they're placed in, and that'll start to give you these weaving patterns so that you can see the full tapestry purpose of a person's chart. And if they're all pointing in one direction, then sure, you can specifically say, this will be a terrible thing for you. If it's pointing in another direction, you can say, this will be a very, very good thing for you. But what you'll find is, for most people, it's average. One goes one way, one goes the other way, which means during the dasha of one particular situation, it'll be good. During another dasha, it'll be bad. And that's just the nature of astrology and human nature in general. And astrology should be a reflection of human nature because that's what we're talking about here. So try your best to be as realistic as possible about how life works. And again, this is why yoga and meditation are so helpful, because it clears away your preconceptions, it clears away your fantasies, so that you can see what is versus what we would like to be. Now, we can work towards what we would like to be, but we have to be realistic about what's it going to take. You want to be enlightened? Learn to meditate, study scriptures, spend a good 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day focusing on that, meditating, doing it well. That's the other key. You got to do it well. If you want to be a musician, you got to practice every day, hours a day. If you want to be a successful musician, you got to understand how the music business works. If you want to have good relationships, you have to be realistic about what does it take, what sacrifices are necessary to have a good relationship. So all these things go together. And it's reflected within the birth chart, particularly the Lajatatiya Vastas, because that's going to show us where we get tripped up, the things that are getting in our way, and also where we're going to have support and win. So enjoy this procedure. And next up, it looks like we will be talking about Graha and Rashi aspects. They're different things, and they do different things, so we don't want to get them confused. I've already done one talk on this, so if you want to jump ahead, you can go back through old talks, old videos, and you'll find it about the difference between Graha and Rashi aspects. And then we'll keep going with the disposition of each planet to the particular ascendant, because it's different for every ascendant. Yogas in general. And we've got about 10 or 12 videos left within this series, 10 or 12 talks left within this series. So it's been really a joy to do, and don't hesitate to post your questions. Not the questions like, please read my chart, because I do that every day with clients, so they always get my first attention when it comes to reading charts. But if there's something you don't understand, ask that, and hopefully I'll have time to respond. So be well, and I look forward to continuing the process with you. Thank you.